I want to welcome you here this morning. It's, as Faye mentioned, it's an experiment this weekend. We normally would separate out Parents' Weekend, Alumni Weekend, Accepted Students Day, but given the fact that we only have one Saturday basketball game in the month of February, today is the day. So it really is all driven by the basketball game this afternoon. And we're happy to have so many of you here on campus. To all of you who are prospective students, we welcome you. We know you face a difficult and exciting choice about where to spend the next 4 years of your life. And we hope that this weekend in the providence of God gives you a taste of what it would be like to be here at Providence College. Parents, we're thrilled to have you back. We want you to share this 4 years with your children. And this is a weekend for you to catch up with them, for you to check in on them, if you will. And we're excited that you're back and you're able to see what we're doing on campus. Alumni, we're always thrilled to have you back. And if I hear one thing more than anything else from our alumni when they come back, is they say, wow, we can't believe how the college has changed. And as much as we continue to change, and we have to change, and we will change, at our heart, we remain who we are, and we have not changed. And managing continuity and change at the same time is probably the biggest challenge that we face going forward. To maintain our fidelity to who we were, and to also adapt to what we need to do to educate our students into the future. Today, we are especially blessed to be able to talk about Catholicism, which is much in the newspapers in the last few days and has occupied a lot of my time. Catholics seem to have peculiar beliefs about a lot of things. But if you asked me to drill down and tell you what is a heart of Catholicism, it is this: the belief that God has become human. And the radical implications of our belief that God has become human are what we explore at Providence College. It means that a human life can reveal God. It means that human achievement, from music and art and sacred buildings and everything else, can reveal the divine. It means that human thought can say something about God. Poetry can preach. A man in a pulpit wearing a white robe can say something of Jesus Christ. Everything that's human can reveal the divine is the fundamental premise of Catholicism and the fundamental premise of a Providence College education. And no one has explored that more beautifully and in the way that it needs to be explored. You can't explain Catholicism without showing pictures, without showing buildings, without talking about history and human beings. And I'm obviously segueing my way into an introduction of the main part of our keynote this morning. Now, Faye talked about the weather gods smiling upon us. The weather gods did and didn't smile upon us today. We didn't get quite the snow we thought we were going to get, but something happened in the airport in Chicago, and Father Barron is not here today. All right, he's let it out. Oh, geez, some of you I know came because you've seen Father Barron on TV. And Father Barron languished in Chicago airport last night and called us and said, my flight was canceled. I can't make it to Providence today. So the weather gods, well, actually there's only one God, the weather god did not smile upon us with respect to Father Barron. But here's the good news. The good news is that whom I consider the real, Father Barron was the guy out in front of the screen, but behind the screen, Mike Leonard, Providence College alum, class of 1970, was the guy that really helped Father Barron put this thing together. and he came in early. So we have Mike Leonard. And yes. And Mike Leonard can speak as knowledgeably, maybe not about Catholicism, but about the series as anyone else can. We've got plenty of video clips, and I couldn't be happier to be able to introduce Mike Leonard. I've introduced Mike before. Mike you all know who Mike Leonard is. He's been on the Today Show and produced a lot of things for television. He sent all his kids to Providence College. He wrote a wonderful book that I would recommend to all of you, The Ride of Our Lives. He has been a tireless champion of Providence College. He played hockey here. This is how cool Mike Leonard is. Yesterday, we had a reception at my house last night where the people that are running this thing came up to me kind of breathlessly, as you can imagine, going, "Father Barron's not going to be here." Oh boy. And Mike Leonard's at this reception. "No problem. I got this. I'll cover this." So I said to Mike, "Does this mean you're not going to go to the hockey game?" No, I'll just do it when I get home after the hockey game. So we watched Providence beat Maine last night, which is a big win for us. And Mike says, "Well, I'll go home. I'll pull this thing off when I get home." So Mike, I don't know what you did last night. Yeah, there it is. It's on a piece of paper. Yeah, that's part of the act, is Mike makes believe he hasn't prepared everything, but he has. It's all up here. And I couldn't be happier and more relieved, given the fact that Father Barron isn't here, to present to you Mike Leonard to talk about the serious Catholicism. Mike.
Thank you, Father Shanley. It's always so great to Providence because, as I'll tell you in a minute, it was providential that I came to school here, and it really changed my life around and led to the fact that I was able to, be around and to be aware enough that when Father Barron came knocking, I was sort of ready to go, although a bit reluctantly, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. I have some clips. I don't know if you can see these up here now. That's Father Barron. That's who you missed, this eminent theologian, who is the most brilliant person I've ever met. Very, very smart about art and architecture and life. Very, very funny as well. And we've had a wonderful time, but he's not here, and that's who you got, PC hockey player. Now, when I played back in the 60s, I played for Lou Lamoriello, who has won 3 Stanley Cups in the NHL, is in the NHL Hall of Fame. Great coach and a great teacher about life and things like that. Because it was back then, there weren't many records of our playing, films and stuff like that. But there is one piece of film that's existing today that shows me playing hockey. And my whole 4 years of hockey at Providence is condensed in this 15-second film. And all it is, you'll see, is me hitting a guy after the whistle. So that's me skating number 14, and there's a little scrum in the corner. You'll see me coming from the left of the frame, right about there, and hitting that guy. In case you missed it, here it is. So basically, I was breaking the rules, and that's what I'm known for here. But it was, as my hockey mates know, that's part of the game, is backing up your teammates and being there. Let's go with the next one. I have at NBC for 30 years, and I've done over 1,000 stories. I'm going to give you a little introduction about my life before we talk about the project. And I never took any media courses or journalism courses, but I know that my education at Providence, the well-rounded education, was sort of the reason why I could look at the world and understand it. Also, I think there's something inside of me that spoke to me about telling stories and being a journalist. And that can be kind of seen in this picture. That's my son Brendan caught on a fence, and he's getting the world's biggest wedgie at the time. I don't know if you can see that. Brendan is sitting right there taking films. I had gone to the park with Brendan, and we had climbed over the fence to get some of the ball or something, and he got caught like that. And I said, oh, you got to hold on. I got to go home and get my camera here. So I left Brendan like that for a while, and because it's no good unless it's recorded. There he is. At NBC, I've had the pleasure of working with all the major people: Bob Costas, Jane Pauley, Tom Brokaw, there's Gumbel, Katie Couric, Al and Meredith and Matt. Met some interesting people along the way, baseball players, boxers, been all over the farms and fields. That picture's from Appalachia. Interviewed, this sort of the Hollywood types. There I am with Penelope Cruz. I remember that was a very difficult interview because I was really distracted by her earrings that day. So anyway, that's my sort of professional background. And about 3 or 4 years ago, Father Barron, who would come to our parish and say Mass about once a month, I was really struck by how brilliant he was and what a great speaker he was and how he would make things understandable to me. And he asked if a fellow parishioner came up to me and asked if Father Barron, if we could do something and make him aware to more people on television. And Father Barron said, well, the one thing I want to do is I have in my mind this series, this 10-part series called Catholicism. And this woman in our small town went out and raised the money to do this. It was not something that was brought down by the church. It was just people who made this happen. And we went all over the world and did this wonderful thing with Father Barron. And he, before I went on the journey, I said, you don't really, though, want me, because I'm not the world's best Catholic. I consider myself a lazy Catholic, use the term cruise control Catholic, because even though I was raised Catholic, went to Catholic schools all my life, I had just gotten lazy and didn't really pay much attention. And I think a lot of Catholics share what I'm saying here. I had issues, didn't really think them out, but it was kind of knee-jerk reactions to things that happened in the past or present. There certainly are problems, but I'd say, I can't, the Inquisition or the place of women in the church, or on and on and on. I had all these issues. I wasn't an angry Catholic. I was just one who seemed to be, didn't invest in it, didn't think about it more. I was almost like, I was Catholic like I was Irish. I was born Catholic. And I wasn't against anything. I was just non-committal, really. And Father Barron said, no, that's who we want you because of who you are. We want, that's always been the case in the church with people who are called upon to sort of lend to the message is who is perfect? Nobody. But I want to tell you a couple things about my grammar school that influenced me in a positive way. I went to Sacred Heart School, suburb of Chicago. And I wasn't a good student. I was always struggling in the classroom. And so I had to find another way of understanding how life worked. I was small. I was fairly athletic, but I was tiny and not very confident and all the rest. And one day, when I was about 8th grade, I was the third smallest boy in the class of 52, 26 boys and 26 girls and 1 nun. And it was a playground recess at lunchtime, and one of the bigger kids was shoving me around and hassling me and being a bully and all the rest. And I didn't really know what to do. I was so much bigger than I was. But after a while, there was nothing to do, and I smacked him, and he fell down, and I got on top of him, and I said, I told you not to do that. And I noticed he wasn't fighting, and I sort of learned about bullies that day, that sometimes that's what the way they are. They intimidate you. But when I was on top of him like that, I looked across the playground and I saw Sister Regina Therese like that, with her big black habit looking at me. And I thought, oh, I'm going to pay for this. So I go back to the classroom, and right before class started, she says, Mike Leonard, come to the front here. And she was angry, and she made a big show of grabbing me by the shoulder and yanking me into the hallway. And when we got into the hallway, she said, she kept holding onto my shoulder. She said, I saw what happened on that playground, and I liked it. and I thought, wow, what a great lesson. And it was, we tend to sometimes, oh, the nuns or the priests or whatever, what do they know? Well, they know a lot, and it's what we don't know most often. So I took that little lesson and sort of kept going. And like I said before, that's my first report card in high school. Now that's one my parents saved, so I don't know what else is out there. And I had a tough time. I had 5 years of high school. I couldn't get into college my first time around. SATs were lousy, my grades were lousy. I was a hockey player in Chicago, and back then Chicago hockey players were not playing Division I hockey. So I applied everywhere, got rejected, applied to Providence, got rejected. And I had no place to go. And my father said, I know a Dominican priest, a really good guy who I met in the Navy. I haven't seen him in 30 years, but I'm going to call him up. And he called him up, and that priest called Providence, and I got a phone call from Father Begley, who was then the athletic director, and he said, Mike, you're accepted on probation, and welcome to Providence. So I came to Providence. I never saw the campus to the first day of my freshman year, which is that day there. And of course, everybody said, well, you can't play hockey at a Division I school. You're a Chicago kid. Those kids just don't play. But I did play, and I played for that great coach, and I saw Rich Pumple out here, one of my great teammates, a great player from Montreal. And it was just, again, I grew with sort of the knowledge of what I could do compared to what society said I can't do. And, I struggled. I was okay in the classroom. I wasn't great, but I had wonderful teachers, mentors. Father Driscoll, who I was sitting with, I had the unfortunate duty of being living in our dorm, our third floor dorm in Joe's Hall in 1968, and it was as wild as it could be. And every time I've seen Father Driscoll since that time, I come up to him and go, I am so sorry. And I'll say that to the day I die. But he was great. He was a great person and another, great influence because of all that was going on in society back then. He was a rock, as were so many of these priests and coaches and athletic directors and all the rest at Providence College. So I left, and I married this wonderful girl, Kathy, who I knew from high school. And I went to training camp with the professional team in Phoenix. I didn't make it, and I started my life. And I didn't get into TV for a long time, for 8 or 9 years. But we had children right away. Our first, Matt, who's on that camera right over there, another Providence alum. And I was feeling blessed, but a little bit, I think cocky, like I made this team, I got into that school. I can fight, I can do it all on my own. That danger of when you start thinking that you are the light. And that light was really, I was told about that light one evening. Our second child, Megan, was about 3 at the time. And we were living in Phoenix, and I went to a friend's house. My wife and Megan and myself and Matt. And Matt was a couple years older, for a pool party at a professional hockey player's house, good friend of mine. And so after dinner, my wife and the kids and all the other kids went inside this house, and I stayed outside and I was playing water basketball in the pool with these players, 4 or 5 of these professional hockey players, good athletes. And it was dark, and at one point, a fella threw the ball to me, but went way over my head into the deep end. And I kind of laughed at him because it was such a lousy pass. But I pushed off, and I went under the water towards where the ball was. And as I got towards the light at the end, I saw something obscuring the light. And as I got closer, I could see it was this red dress and these little sandals. And it was Megan, who had left the house unseen and fallen into the water. And she was still like that. And I picked her up, and I got her, and I pounded her back, and water gushed out of her mouth, and she opened her eyes. And I was just shaking there thinking, that's only because of a bad pass. That was only because of a mistake. Another 10 seconds, or if nobody saw her, she wouldn't be around today. And when Father Shenley was talking about God earlier, about being in everything, a lot of times we think of God just helping us out, but he is everywhere, in beautiful music, in sadness, in tragedy, and in that case, watching over me. So, those more and more of those things happened, and when Father Barron, kept insisting that I join him on this trip, even though my credentials as a Catholic, my self-described credentials were so lousy, he said, no, God wants you on this journey. And the journey really changed all of us, myself, my son Matt, who was the director and producer. And it was inch by inch. I'm going to play you a clip of Father Barron talking about the cross. Now, I'd never heard the cross referred to in this manner. But I think it's profound what he says.
Yeah, I just love that image of Jesus the warrior, because he's a weird warrior. He's a very unusual warrior, not in the expected way, but he's come to fight. He's come to fight the power of evil and the power of violence, the power of hatred. And the Bible is a book of battles. It's just nothing but battles. There's a war going on, spiritual warfare. And the great revelation is that he fights with the weapon of the cross. He fights by allowing evil to overwhelm him and to take it on himself so as to take it away through the divine forgiveness. But they use martial imagery all the time throughout the Bible, and even of him. And he's, there's this mano a mano with Pontius Pilate going on. And we saw that from the very beginning. It's Jesus and the Roman emperor kind of going mano a mano. And at the end, Pilate thinks he's won. But in fact, it's Pilate who's been overwhelmed by the power of the cross. And that's proclaimed all over the world whenever the cross is held up. Because a cross? Why would you hold up a cross? If you're in the first century, you're holding up a cross, they think you're out of your mind. They think you're a lunatic. You're holding up this brutal instrument of torture. But that's just the irony. It's an in your face. And it's a taunt. It's a taunt. Like, you think that scares us? You think we're afraid of that? The whole world's afraid of that. That's the most frightening thing you can imagine. And we're saying, I'm not afraid of it, because God's conquered it. So that's all the warrior stuff that I think is all through the Bible.
Is that why the cross is the symbol?
Yeah. It's a taunt to the world. That symbolizes the power of the world. The world is run often through violence and domination, the threat, fear of punishment. And Christians say, we're not afraid. That's like the martyrs. We're not afraid. I know, you can throw the worst thing you got at us. You can kill us, but we're not afraid. There's enormous power in that. See, that's the dunamis that Paul talks about, power of the gospel. That's the power that John Paul II knew about when he took on the Soviet Union. He knew about that. That if you unleash this power, it can overwhelm the powers of the world. The trouble is we get lured by them into playing their own game, But the biblical thing is always like David against Goliath. It's always the little guy using this odd, indirect method that overwhelms the powerful. Jesus on the cross is this David figure. He took on the Goliath, of the powers of the world, but actually undermined them through his own deft move.
Now, that went on and on to different topics, and it stripped away so many of my sort of knee-jerk reactions. Early on, I learned. I said, well, what about all these problems? What about the stuff that we read about in the news? He said, that's people. He said, we're people. People, we are a flawed lot. All of us have flaws. And any organization that becomes big, or a group, will soon be, or the attempt will be, to corrupt the organization with people. And so you can't expect a government or a corporation or any organization to be perfect, because people, we are imperfect. But the message of forgiveness and mercy and compassion and love, see, that never changes. And when he was talking about that to me, I was, I sort of thought, well, when I go to church, what am I thinking about when I'm thinking about all these problems? Why don't I just dwell on what Jesus said and what the followers of him preached and how the world was changed? Forgiveness wasn't allowed back then, and Jesus said, "You're forgiven." And the people said, "You can't do that. You can't forgive. People don't do that." And talking to the woman at the well, you don't talk to women in public, or that you can't bring that blind person, that lame person. They're supposed to be outside society. You don't turn the other cheek. You don't do this or that. And so it was so revolutionary, and we have come to see it in a much more docile manner. Jesus, he said, "I want to de-domesticate Jesus." That this was a revolt. This was a revolution in society, and it's so powerful. And the whole message. We frown upon the news of a homeless teenage pregnant girl. And who was homeless and teenage and pregnant but Mary? And Jesus was born in this abject poverty. The worst situation you could possibly imagine, with animals around. And the message, of course, was it's not about wealth and power and might. It's about forgiveness. That's the stuff that will set you free. And I was, saying to Father Barron again that I know I don't have the courage to have done what those early Christians did, go to my death. Heck, I would hardly even, back up the Catholic Church if I heard somebody at Starbucks, running it down. What am I going to do if my life is on the line? And same with the civil rights movement. What would I have done in Alabama or Mississippi as a white person? Would I have risked everything I have to go on the side of good? I don't think I'm that strong. And so I would say that to Father Barron, and he said, "Well, look, it's like, don't beat yourself up." And I said, "I'm not. I'm just trying to be honest." He said, "Well, it's like when you're in a car and you're driving towards another light, another car coming. You'll see all the marks on your windshield because you're heading towards the light. And in this case, you're heading towards the truth. You'll see all your blemishes, but just keep going." He said, if you're going the opposite direction and you're going towards the darkness, it all looks very, very clear to you. You don't see any of your problems. You're in charge. And so I think the humility of knowing my weaknesses, my flaws, knowing our flaws, everybody in here, knowing the church's flaws in people, are to be expected. But what's to be revered and followed is the message, and the message is pure, and that's what I learned. And so I go around, and if Father Barron were here, he'd probably, I know he would say it in a way more articulate manner. But we shot these episodes, 10 of them. Matt was the director and the editor, and did a brilliant job. The photography was unbelievable. And so this 10-part series is now making its way around the country. It's been on public television. That was a huge upset. Nobody thought that could happen. And it's strengthening, it's sort of like strengthening the base. Like if you're in an army that's it's not doing well, or a team, the first thing you want to do is you got to get the uniforms straight. You got to get the discipline back. You have to get people to believe in themselves. So I think that this is the first sort of tipping point in that direction. It's all come from the people, but it's a reminder of what the faith is. That you don't have to apologize for it all the time. You can take pride in it. I was using the analogy to someone who said, "Well, I just can't get past the abuse scandal." And I said, "Well, it's tough. I think it's got to be fixed. But what about slavery? We got past that. That was our country doing something bad. It was bad people in our country doing bad things. We move on as a country, and I think as Catholics, it's best that we try to move on. I think that and I was talking to Father Barron about this, the series to me made me seek stories that about people, don't have to be Catholic, who are doing the right thing. You know, our television culture, our media culture has become so corrupted by, you know, the false reality, the Kardashian stuff, and it's hard to see goodness, it's hard to see hope, and so you feel that the whole society and humanity is collapsing around you. And I'm fortunate enough at my job at NBC to be able to pick my stories, and after all these years, they just have a little slot open for me. And so I can pick what I want, and I don't have to run them by anybody. And I'm going to show a story that I did early December that I heard about this young couple who bought a house in Chicago. And they found money, and what they did was the right thing. And you watch it, you wonder what you would have done, or I watch and think what I would have done.
They had just moved into this modest house in a working-class Chicago neighborhood when Joe DeGrief and his wife Kathy Ward suddenly found themselves pondering what might have been had they held on to the small fortune that was briefly in their grasp.
Just always thinking when we find something that needs to be fixed in the house, we're like, you know,
Which is like every other hour.
you know, what if? But it's just a lot of what ifs, not a second thought, just a what if.
Joe is a mechanic for American Airlines. Kathy is a 911 dispatcher at O'Hare, both working odd hours for the sake of their two small children.
He works midnight shift and I work afternoons so that we don't need a babysitter.
What they could use, like most everybody, is financial security, which suddenly seemed possible just a few months ago after buying this house from the descendants of a deceased elderly woman who had lived here since the late 1940s. None of the woman's surviving family members wanted her time-worn furniture, so Joe and Kathy bought the house and everything inside. Some of it they kept, but much had to go, including the woman's ancient bed.
So I moved the mattress off the box springs and there was a blue bag in between the mattress and the box springs.
A blue money bag, and in it,
$23,840.
nobody besides themselves knew anything about it.
We kind of looked at each other and said we have to give the money back.
You didn't have to.
I guess legally we didn't have to, yes, but we had to. We had to.
It was funny because the night before we were saying, this is what needs to happen. We need new windows. It's like a ice box in here when the wind blows. We need new windows. We need new electric. So we were going over this in our at our dinner table the night before.
Despite their financial needs, Kathy and Joe knew that the money was not meant for them. So they went about trying to find the woman's now retired son, but he wouldn't take their calls. Joe then got into his car, drove to the man's Chicago home, knocked on the door, and when he appeared, Joe told him about finding some money under the mattress. The fellow kind of scoffed, perhaps expecting $20 or $30, then asked, "How much?"
And I said, well, it's just a little over $23,800. And his eyes got big, his mouth dropped open, and I thought he was going to have a heart attack or pass out or something, but then his eyes teared up and he gave me a great big hug.
At St. John Cantius Catholic Church in the heart of Chicago, a young family sits in quiet reverence, counting their blessings while discounting any suggestion that their generous act makes them special in any way.
When pressed, most people will do the right thing.
And if somebody wants to do right by them with a gift or a gesture of appreciation for their good deed, how would Joe and Kathy feel about that? And what would they want?
Just do something for someone nice. You will get the opportunity. It might not be $24,000, but you will get an opportunity to do something for someone, probably today.
For today, Mike Leonard, NBC News, Chicago.
Now, it reminds me, they had all kinds of reasons not to, hey, this guy's not taking our phone calls. There was things wrong with the house. But, Joe said to me, and Kathy, he said, hey, that woman wasn't saving the money for us. That's all you have to know. So you wonder. I mean, it reminded me, watching it again here, of playing hockey for Lou Lamoriello and some of the lessons he instilled upon us. And one I spoke about at Providence a while ago, which was winning the little battles. Like all of us every day, we're not going to find money under a mattress. We're not going to maybe have a chance to do something dramatic. But we have a chance every day to do something. And when we're hockey players, I was not a star. And so we were made to feel valuable by thought and the truth and the fact that you win the little battles. Every game you're going to have 15, 20 occasions where you're going to go into the corner with another person and the puck, come out with it, or block a shot, or take a hit to set somebody else free. You have many opportunities every game. That will never end up in the stat sheet, and it'll never make you a star or an All-American or anything like that. But you do that, and your team does that, you win. And if we do that as humans, society wins. It's hard, how you stop gossip in the office, or you do a kind thing for someone who's been ostracized, or something. They present themselves all the time. And like I've always said, I am not the poster child of doing all these great things. But the more I go through life, the more I hear what the Father Barron and the Catholic Church has to say, the real truth of that, it gives me strength to do it. Another thing that gave me strength, and I'm nearing the end here, is that some years ago I went on this journey with my parents and family around the country to give my parents a break. They didn't have much money. They were stuck in a rental home. And so we got a couple rented RVs, and I gave them an adventure, took some time off from work, and all the rest. And on the first night of our journey, I was in one RV with my parents, and they were in the back bedroom, and I was sleeping on the couch. And through the sort of partially open curtains, I could see my 82-year-old father at the time on his knees saying his prayers at the foot of the bed. And it struck me because I'd never seen him do that. I mean, I wouldn't be in his bedroom when he's going to sleep. And I thought, look, he looked like a little boy. He looked like a little 8-year-old saying his prayers, hoping that he wins the game tomorrow or something. And I thought to myself, I can't remember the last time I've been on my knees, like saying prayers like that. But then again, I didn't go through the Depression in World War II. I didn't lose a child, and my dad did. I didn't have a family that was going through really rough times and he lost a couple siblings. I didn't lose my life savings a couple times like my dad did. So I've had it easy. So maybe I didn't, feel the need again to be so open and to say I need help. My dad died in May at 94. And he was a good man. He didn't die with any money at all. We paid all the funeral expenses and stuff like that. But he left a really good legacy because he was just a good man. And I'm going to play you to end this, and I'll tell one quick story after that. The last episode of this journey, when we took the journey, I took our home movie cameras, and I decided to make a little Today Show series about it. And in the end, we're heading towards home. Now, the earlier episodes were pretty funny because my parents are funny and my mom's goofy. But this one gets serious because we're going back to New London, Connecticut, where their baby, who died at birth during the war, was buried, but they never really talked about that baby. In the meantime, our daughter, Megan, the girl who fell in the pool, is about to give birth to her first child in Chicago, and we're trying to rush back to get there in time. And while I'm on that leg of the journey, I get a call from my wife saying that there's something wrong with the ultrasound. So now I'm keeping that news from my parents just like they kept the news of their little girl from us growing up. So this is the last part of that series.
This morning on Winter's Look, Mike's cross-country trip with his parents comes full circle as he turns the RV around and heads back to his home in Chicago. The family adventure is coming to an end just in time for a new one to begin.
As we drive to New London, Connecticut, the last stop before heading back to Chicago for the imminent birth of my first grandchild, my mind is preoccupied with the previous evening's troubling phone conversation about a possible problem detected during my daughter's last ultrasound. To avoid worrying my parents, I keep the news to myself, knowing that New London is not the place to dwell on what could go wrong.
That's it, right
sure,
there with the red roof.
Yeah.
We stop at the house where my parents and 3 other young Navy couples rented rooms during World War II.
Oh, they were the nicest people we ever knew, Mike.
Yeah, great.
My father came home from the sea. The other men didn't. New London is also the burial place of my parents' only daughter, their first child, named Anne, who died at birth.
Never gave thought that things wouldn't be great. Well, let me tell you, when it didn't turn out just right, it was one hell of a shock.
Oh, no, you don't forget it. No. That baby had a bad heart. And those days, they couldn't fix things in those days like they do today.
They rarely talk about that painful chapter in their life, so without telling them, I take my children to the cemetery to find Anne's grave. We search and search, but her nameplate couldn't be found.
A lot of those got lost, because if the mower hits them, if they get too high, the mower hits them, they're gone.
Guided by a cemetery map, a worker does his best to mark her grave.
So the baby is there.
The baby's definitely there.
Just coming here, this is really sad, and seeing these little baby graves, and I'm getting kind of teary just thinking about it.
Even though I never tell my parents about the worries concerning Megan's baby, they seem to know. Parents always do. Finally, we reach Chicago, and the longest wait of our lives. The labor drags on. Then Megan's husband, Jamie, delivers the news.
It's a girl.
And she is healthy. Her first name is Josephine. Her middle name is Anne. She is my parents' first great-grandchild. Before driving my parents back to their rental home in Phoenix, we take them to a favorite restaurant in our tiny town to toast the end of a journey and the beginning of another.
Best part of the trip was today, seeing that beautiful, beautiful baby.
I was thinking it's just amazing that something so little is so big.
For today, Mike Leonard, NBC News, Homeward Bound.
I will just end with a short story. I was telling this to Leo last night, a friend of mine, and doing a story at NBC. I was in Iowa. I was traveling from the hotel to the story, driving by myself, and I passed a monastery, and I saw the monks working in the field, and I wondered about the monks, and I said, what about that life? What about a life of prayer? Does prayer work? I was just asking myself these questions. At the end of the day, at 4 o'clock, I was heading back to the hotel, and by myself, I decided to stop in to the monastery because I saw that they had a bookstore. So I went into the bookstore, and I wasn't shooting a story or anything. I was just curious. And there was an old monk sitting on a stool, and he seemed to be sleeping. He was very old, and his head was down. And I looked at a book, and about a minute later, I heard this voice, "Are you Irish?" And I looked over, and he was looking at me with a bent neck like that because something's wrong with his neck. And I said, "Well, my grandparents are from Ireland. I bet you're Irish." He goes, "I am." I said, "Where are you from?" He said, "Tipperary." I said, "Where in Tipperary?" He said, "Oh, a tiny small town. You've never heard of it." "What's the name of it?" "Oh, you wouldn't know it." And I said, "Well, have you been back?" he looked at me and he said, I haven't been past these front gates since I was 17. I went, wow. I thought, what do you know at 17? And then I said, well, would you like to go back? He said, oh, I'd love to go back, but I can't. This is where God wants me to be, but I'm happy because I'm where God wants me to be, and I'll die here, and I will die happy. And I said, what's the name of the town? He said, oh, you wouldn't know it. Nobody goes there. I said, what? He said, well, it's a town called Fethard, F-E-T-H-A-R-D. I said, wow, well, not only have I heard of it, but I've been to your town. And he looked at me and he said, what's it like? I said, it's exactly like you remember it. And I remembered it because the only reason I was in Fethard, the only reason I remembered Fethard is I was in Ireland 8 or 9 years earlier or whatever, and I would go off by myself often at the end of the day into a small town and just check it out. One day that town was Fethard. It was nothing special about it, so I got out of my car, I looked around, and I went back to my car to leave, but for some reason I opened the trunk and I took out my home video camera and I started shooting Fethard. And I shot the streets, I shot the shops, I shot the hills, I shot an interview with a priest walking by. And then I sort of laughed at myself and said, why did I do that? And so for 8 or 9 years, I never looked at that video. And that's why I remembered Fethard. It was a place where I shot that video that I would never look at. So I said to the monk, I said, I have home movies of your town. And he said, I've never seen a movie. I said, well, I think you should see this. And so I went to the front, said goodbye to him, went to the front, and I asked for the abbot and told him about it. If you could rent this VCR machine, I'll send a tape. And I went home and I found the tape and I dubbed it off and I sent it to Iowa. And I didn't hear anything for a couple months, so I figured, well, they never did it. And then I got I remember, it was a little yellow note card envelope, scrawled writing on the outside. And I opened it up and it said, Dear Michael, God sent an angel. I was able to go home before I died. And I thought, wow, I was struck by the fact that I'm not an angel. I'm so far from being considered an angel, just again, looking at those scratches on my windshield. But then I thought, well, you know what I am? I'm a delivery boy. And you don't have to be great to do that. You can take a message or a good thought or a good word, and you can deliver it. And it might not mean much to you or might not have any value to you, but in that case, that meant everything to him. That tape didn't mean anything to me. Well, certainly, my faith means something to me. And even though I am an imperfect messenger, I'm gladly serving as a delivery boy here. Father Barron is the brilliant one. What was, Jesus and all that happened is the message. I am just a guy, a flawed character going around trying to pass this notion on to people who have maybe been like me, who just sort of skipped a beat and forgot about it for a bit. Thank you for instilling all of that Providence College in me, at least the spirit to fight, the spirit to believe and to speak in front of people. When Father Barron couldn't come, well, now all bets are off. What am I going to say? So I hope it wasn't too boring, but I would be terrified to have done this prior to going to school here. But my ship was set sail and, hit a few rocks along the way, but I knew that I was bound for something bigger than I could even imagine. And I think every kid who goes here has that same wind at their back. So thank you for having me back, Father. Thank you for the great introduction. And Father Driscoll, I'm so sorry.